Good evening and welcome to the Courier. Tonight it's the Battle of Ballarat, the federal election 2016 with up-to-date coverage of how things are faring in the federal seat of Ballarat, held by the Labor member Catherine King by 4.9%. We've got some interesting early figures. But first, let's have a look at the long campaign we've had today. It has been a long campaign, almost 2 months. I think to top that off, there was also some long waits in the queues today at some of the polling booths. But we'll just refresh some of the, I guess, some big things that have come up over this campaign. It hasn't been a Ballarat-focused campaign so far, long as it has been. There weren't a lot of major promises for Ballarat. There was also no visits from either of the major party leaders to Ballarat. It was fairly disappointing from a local perspective. I think this election has been very much for all national issues. So that's added an interesting perspective to a long and sometimes trying campaign. A couple of curveball issues in the last couple of weeks, though, have certainly come up and quite possibly will have an outcome tonight. The first is probably the CFA issue, the state fight between the UFU and the CFA, but the volunteers from the CFA have certainly been campaigning hard at a lot of the booths today and in the weeks leading up to the election. And then the other sort of curveball, given that health is such a important issue here in Ballarat, was highlighted as one of the key issues, and of course Catherine is the Shadow Minister for Health, was the focus on the Medicare changes that the Labor Party pushed in the last couple of weeks. But for right now, that's some of the colour of the long campaign behind us. For right now, let's have a look at the status from the polling booths and the count. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Eugene. So we've had about 40,000 votes counted so far. We've got 110,000 people voting in Ballarat, so it's not quite half the way through yet. The AEC is saying that it's looking like Catherine will get 56% of the two-party preferred vote. That would be, just under 2% improvement for her. Obviously, we've still got some time to go, but it is looking like the Liberals will be disappointed once again in Ballarat. The other thing that was going to be a surprise this election, we were thinking in the result was Paul Tatchell for the Nationals. Now, we haven't had a Nationals candidate for almost 30 years. Tatchell has, he's a well-known figure, former Mayor of Moorabool, current Deputy Mayor, and he's, known as a character around town. He's got just under 5% of the vote at the moment. He was aiming for between 6 and 8%. We were thinking he could go higher, but it's not seeming that way at the moment.
So even at this early stage, and we do reiterate that there's only about a quarter of the votes counted so far, not as big a swing as might have been expected for Catherine, or how would you read that?
It's tricky because Catherine experienced such a strong swing against her in 2013 in that national rout of Labor. She lost, some have it at 8%, some have it at 6%, to John Fitzgibbon in that race, and coming off an even stronger margin. So the numbers are a little bit funny in any case, but we expected her to hold the seat. The dent that could be made depended on the candidate and the issues that came up on the day, and that's been CFA and not much else really.
So the Liberals were looking at a 4.9% swing to retain the seat. So we're not talking a huge change there. At the moment, the AEC is reading it at 1.63% swing to Labor. It's not a big change. I think what this looks like is perhaps a little bit indicative of the country. It's very close. There was quite possibly a lot of seats that won't be called, in the next couple of hours. There's some pretty close calls up there. So I think that's probably a good opportunity for us to segue. Let's go down to Liberal Party headquarters, who are meeting at the George Hotel tonight, and Fiona Henderson is there. What's it like there, Fiona?
Well, the party only just really started, Eugene, but I am with the Sarah the Liberal Party candidate Sarah Wade's campaign chair, Craig Coltman, who has spent the last half an hour frantically answering phone calls and writing down results. So I think he's actually looking forward to a bit of a chance for a sit down and a bit of a chat with us.
Yeah, and is there a sense that the campaign is anybody calling it down there?
Oh, look, I've just had a bit of a chat with Craig about it, and as he described it, as a bit of a mixed bag of results at the moment, and I think it's way too early for anyone to be sort of saying too much about it at all. At the George tonight, Eugene, so far?
Yeah, all right, I'll leave it over to you, Fiona.
So, Craig, what was the atmosphere like when you were going around the polling booth today?
Oh, look, I'd say it was very positive. Look, I suppose the thing about Election Day, from my perspective, is it's a great celebration of our democracy. You've got all these volunteers out from all these different parties. We're all out there safely exercising our democratic right to vote.
Yep.
And I see that as being incredibly positive, and one of the great things about our nation.
Yeah, exactly. And how did you think Sarah, I know it's been a really long campaign for Sarah, how do you think she's travelled through the campaign? She's not here yet, she's obviously having a bit of a break.
Yeah, she's having a little bit of a rest, and we wouldn't begrudge her that, because look, she's worked extremely hard. I don't think people really appreciate just how challenging it is when you're a candidate, and particularly a first-time candidate like Sarah. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult job. At times, whilst you've got the support of party and supporters, etc., it can be a very lonely place to be in as well. A lot of self-doubt at times, and I think she's handled herself extremely well through the whole process.
Yes, I haven't actually met her yet, so I'm looking forward to meeting her tonight. Now, obviously, Ballarat hasn't received a whole lot of projects or promises from either party through this election. What's your thoughts on that? Is Ballarat seen as a marginal seat, or do you think that it also was always considered a safe Labor seat?
Look, I guess you'd have to say it tends to be more of a safer Labor seat, unfortunately, from the Liberals' perspective. But I think it's really, if you look at federal campaigns, what they're about is good government for a nation. And I would contend that what's good in Cairns, Darwin, is also good in Ballarat. It's about running the economy, about managing our country well. Yeah. And I think that's uniform, irrespective of whereabouts you are in Australia. I think the electorate has actually moved beyond the sort of what's in it for me style pork barrelling, and I actually don't believe that the electorate votes depending on who gives X million dollars for this or that. It's about which country has the best plan for Australia.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for talking with us tonight, Craig. I'll let you get back to answering your phone that's been ringing off the hook even while we've been doing this interview. Back to you, Eugene, and back at the Courier office.
Thanks, Fiona. Some wise words from a veteran campaigner. It's certainly indicating just how hard it is on a long campaign like this. And I think that's an interesting point that a lot of people don't consider, just the amount of legwork that has to be done by every candidate to make sure that effectively we have got good candidates who are exercising our democratic rights, as Craig said. Interesting variation in this election, of course, has been the growing trend towards pre-polling. We estimated from the count last night as much as 30,000, close to a third of the votes were polled prior to election day. Now, if you add another 10,000 postal votes to that, you've got a big chunk of votes which haven't yet been, the results haven't yet been released of, but really significant result, which is actually now being decided well out from election day. What's your take on that, Alex?
Well, school holiday election. It's winter, so who wants to line up in the cold for a while? So I think that came into it as well. I think we've got about there's probably 8,000 to 10,000 people who voted yesterday as part of that 30,000 number. I think it's going to be interesting to see when they filter through, because it does take a bit longer. Quirk of our outdated counting system, when a lot less people pre-polled. So we'll see how those votes come in. I mean, people voted 2 weeks ago. We did have most of our promises then. Our major parties have been running the same themes since it started, with a bit more of an emphasis on Medicare and the CFA issue coming in. But nationally, the issues have been the same. So it'll be interesting to see when they come in. that's really when we'll know how important that staggered voting cycle has been.
All right, so here's an update. We've got 26.79% of the vote counts according to the AEC, and Catherine King is definitely in a good position to retain the seat, with what the AEC is reporting as a 1.6% swing to her, so that her margin will be up slightly. Given that, we'll cross to Caleb Clough, who's down at Trades Hall in Camp Street, and he's there with... Who is he there with? So what's the atmosphere like down at Trades Hall, Caleb?
He's muted.
Do you want to just unmute? Okay. Caleb.
Here I am. Here we are.
Yes, there we are. We're down at Trades Hall.
It muted itself, and you were asking me, Eugene, how the atmosphere was down here. There's plenty of beer being drunk. There's plenty of pies and pizza being handed around. People are moving in quite steadily, and they seem pretty confident.
So, is it a celebratory mood?
I wouldn't call it celebratory yet. There's certainly a great deal of camaraderie, and I think that people know they're in a pretty good spot in terms of the seat here. But the election it's quite close at the moment. John and I have been sitting here watching the votes come in and discussing some of the more marginal seats, and it's turning out to be a much more interesting election than we had originally thought.
Yeah, it is close. So,
it is close.
Do you want to introduce our guest?
I do indeed. Many people might remember John Mildren. John held the seat of Ballarat from 1980 until 1990, and he's very kindly come into a freezing cold room here in Trades Hall to have a chat to me this evening. And we're doing it selfie style, so I haven't even got a selfie stick, have I, John? John, you've been a member of the Labor Party all of your life? No?
No? I joined in 1971.
1971. You've been around today. What's the feeling like?
Well, it's positive, but because of the nature of the election, it's over such a tremendously long term, the campaign, I think after a while people didn't quite know what to make of it.
Yes.
I don't think there was any feeling of concern here in this seat. Catherine is a very well thought of a member of the community. Works extremely hard, and I think the rewards are there for her. So at least locally, I think the people are quite happy.
It's been a seat that's travelled between the coalition parties and the Labor Party backwards and forwards since its inception in 1901. What do you think now this will be the 6th time that Catherine's held it? What has brought it into the Labor fold so strongly?
I really feel that there's been a change in the demographic of this community. There was a time when the Western District really dominated Ballarat, and it doesn't anymore, of course. Ballarat's sort of grown, and it's grown beyond itself. It's now very little different from anywhere else in terms of the metropolitan area and so on. So the demographic is a far more independent one than it used to be. People don't touch their forelocks anymore. I mean, they're very proud people here in Ballarat. But it's not just in the Ballarat, the town itself. Within the boundaries, Ballarat has changed as well.
Yes.
That makes a big difference.
And just finally, I think we were talking before that it's much closer to the election overall. Your sense is that there may well be a hung parliament?
Well, we really have to look at what's coming from the West. The West will determine whether it's a hung parliament or not.
Yep.
At the present time, for the rest of Australia, it's an extraordinarily even election.
It is.
But of course, you have to have a look at what comes out of Western Australia, and while the Labor Party will probably win some seats over there, we can't really jump ahead of ourselves.
All right. Eugene, that's John Mildren. There's the years of experience in that there for you. My arm is about to fall off because I'm holding this out here, so I might throw back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Caleb, and thank you, John. It is wonderful to have the benefit of your enormous experience. I think that you're quite right. Even if Anthony Green isn't willing to call a number of seats, I'm not game to do it either. And we must reiterate that it is a relatively small percentage of the vote that has been counted so far. So while the trend in Ballarat is looking like Catherine will comfortably retain the seat, there are many seats out there which are still hanging in the balance, and that will dictate the national outcome. We will be... There was one more thing you wanted to discuss now, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, nationally, Ballarat fits in as a safe Labor seat. But in a broader sense, you know, Anthony Green, as you just mentioned, sage of all elections, says it's really close. He says the Libs will probably hang on, but he's not sure yet. He said there's about 10 seats he can't call. So we'll see, I guess.
So that's something, we'll be back in an hour to discuss some of the issues. Probably, hopefully, we'll get a better idea then, not only of where Ballarat stands, but also where it fits into the national picture. Are we looking at a Labor seat in opposition with another term for Malcolm Turnbull, or are we looking at a cliffhanger election? So we'll be back in an hour and hopefully give you some more updates both on Ballarat and the national situation. Thanks for joining us.